Hello and welcome to Hoya of the Week. Today we have a Hoya that I cannot believe that I did not make a video on because it is one of my favorite Hoyas. Again, I do understand. I say this for every Hoya, but really one of my favorite Hoyas. And this is Hoya spartioides. Now, before we start, I do want to say I do understand that this Hoya is not everyone's cup of tea and that there are probably quite a lot of you that won't like it. I can blame you and I don't understand you and I think you're wrong. That's all I have to say. So this is my Hoya spartioides and she is just, oh my gosh, so adorable. She has grown quite a lot. I do think we have maybe 4 peduncles here, or maybe 5. They're slightly a bit yellow towards the base, which you can kind of see, but that's because this plant at one point had root rot. We will get into all of that, what happened, but I do believe that this is a decently healthy specimen of Hoya spartioides that, if I can say so, grew quite well. It has 20 peduncles, I counted yesterday, and I can't exactly remember how many she had when she arrived, but I think it was about maybe 5 or 6, something like that. It wasn't too many. And I just noticed how much she grew recently. You can even see her kind of going down here. I know I mentioned this in some of the videos. I think I mentioned this Hoya a lot, so that's why I'm confused. And I think I already made a dedicated video, but I didn't. You can kind of see her going down there, the branch. So she grew actually quite a lot in my opinion. Now, Hoya spartioides is a very interesting Hoya. Even if you don't like the look, I don't think you can deny that this is an interesting looking plant. And Hoya spartioides was first published around 1880, I believe, and I do have to look up the name. Astrostema spartioides, that was its first name, and then that was changed to Apsomsia spartioides. Rolls off the tongue, I know. And then in 2001, this was changed to Hoya spartioides by Dale Kloppenborg in Fraterna. As always, I will attach whatever publications I have so you can kind of pause the video and read it. Anyways, we're going to talk about this plant here. And again, it's very, very interesting for several reasons. The way that it kind of came into cultivation I find very interesting, and just sort of preparing this video, I realized I do need affinity spartioides, or actually it's a CF comparable to spartioides, but I think it's very different because the flower is very different on that plant. And there is also Hoya retrorsa, which has, again, a similar look. And there is another clone of Hoya spartioides. I sort of think this is the one that circulates as the new, Hoya spartioides new. And I think now it is more common. The previous one, the first one, looks a little bit different with the flower, but they all sort of have this look here. And since we are on the look of this plant, the name for this plant comes from the plants from the genus called Spartium, and that genus, they're like broom plants and they are used to make ropes from, and oides just means that it resembles that, and you can see it referred to as the broom-like plant in the old Fraterna issues. This Hoya comes from Borneo, Brunei, Kalimantan, Sarawak, and Sabah, and it is a plant that, as you can see, grows mostly peduncles. All of these are peduncles, and they are in charge of photosynthesis. You can sometimes see the leaves on this plant. They're very small, not super pretty, and they tend to fall off pretty fast, but usually you will just find the peduncles on this plant. And the way this plant grows in nature, it grows in the holes in the trees, the rotten out holes in the trees, so the roots will be inside the hole. And usually in the nature, the roots will have a symbiosis with ants. Initially, when this plant was not discovered, but when, I believe it was Ted Green, when he went in 1991, I believe, to Borneo, when he saw it, he thought this was a parasitic plant. And for some time, they thought it was actually a parasitic plant because of the way it presents in nature, but it is not. it definitely can be grown just like in your regular pot. But in those early days, when they would travel to Borneo, they would actually collect the plant with the part of the tree trunk. That's how Ted Green got one of his plants. I think in the first journey he got three, two without the tree trunk and one with, and then the one with the tree trunk survived. The two without, they also lived, and that's when they sort of concluded this is not a parasitic plant, but due to some cultivational issues, they essentially rotted and died. But Toril Nijhuis also got her plant, and when she was also in Borneo, she also kind of took a photo that I will attach here of the plant with a part of a tree trunk, and I think it's sort of like a cross section, so you can kind of see how those roots grow inside the tree trunk. So this does not make an extensive root system. You can sort of see here some of the roots. I do have to tell you this plant did rot. Where are the roots? Oh, okay, I see. That's one of them. And then on the other side, some, can we just decide to focus? Okay, you can see some roots here with moss. And there isn't a lot of moss, and you can see it's quite dry. But there are some charming stories from those early days of cultivation where Toril Nijhuis, when she got this plant with a part of the tree trunk, she went to a nearby forest to look for some ants that she can sort of introduce in the pot with the plant. And she couldn't find any because it was March in Sweden. And she says, all the Swedish ants were still asleep. How cute is that? So she took some of the soil that is naturally found there in the Swedish forest and mixed it in with the soil that with her regular potting mix that she uses for Hoyas. And I do believe Toril may be the first one that have seen the blooms in cultivation, because Ted says that for quite a long time he just, he would see the peduncles on the plant, well, not the peduncles, the buds on the plant, and then the next day they would fall. They didn't know back then. We were talking over 20 years ago, where there is not so much information on Hoyas, and they didn't know that this plant only blooms at night. So Toril, by accident, saw this plant in bloom. I think it was around 11 p.m., she says, and she took the plant out to the nearby forest where the ants are and let the ants crawl all over the plant in hopes that they would pollinate it. Of course, it didn't work. And she says, I just hope that my neighbors don't see me, which is how I also feel when I talk to a camera here and people pass by and like, who is he talking? No one. I'm talking to no one. Let's talk about the blooming, right? This plant will bloom only at night, and she will stay open for several hours, 6-7 hours, it depends. I don't think it's even the whole night. That's why I sort of struggle to take photos of it. I do have that luck, quote unquote, that my plant grows in my grow tent, and my grow tents are set up in such a way, really by accident. I was not smart enough to think about this, but let's pretend that I was. Let's pretend I didn't tell you this. Let's say I did this on purpose, where the lights in my grow tents turn on at night. So they stay off during the day and the tents are closed, no light can get in, and they turn on at night. I did this because this is an old house, and I just think so many lights turned on at the same time is just like a lot of electricity on the electrical network of this house. I'm not going to talk about it. My dad did it. Not a great job that was done, but let's move on. So I was like, maybe we turn on the tents at night. It's a coincidence that actually it's beneficial for me, because Hoyas that bloom at night, I can see them. I don't have to stay up, even though I do stay up actually quite late. I get to see them in flower, so it's not so difficult with Hoya spartioides, Hoya mapigera, Hoya puvoaensis, all of those that sort of open fully at night. I do get to experience them and take quick photos during the day. But the flower on Hoya spartioides is a bit short lasting. I do forgive it because, again, I do get to see it quite frequently. It blooms a lot. Even now we have at least 6 or 7 peduncles that have buds on them. I did damage one. Oh well, not the peduncle, just the buds, but it's fine. It will rebloom. It blooms really frequently, and even if you don't have a setup that is similar to mine, I do believe that you will definitely get to see the flowers. The flowers, they are orangey with a very weak scent, and the flowers on this clone are smaller than the initial clone that was discovered. That one has larger flowers. I will be looking for that one as well. But this one has smaller flowers. I don't find this difficult to grow, and I do think for what it is a very good grower. I mean, do you have any other Hoya that grows so many peduncles at once? I don't know. I don't think I do. So I would say that this is a very good grower. I myself dare not propagate it. I don't think I want to cut it. It would really have to be a very, very, very special occasion for me to do that. So for now, that's a no, but you would essentially cut it and root it. And I did lose the roots on my plant, so I can tell you that it sounds a bit scary to cut this plant and to root it, but it's not that hard. I did lose a couple of peduncles in the rooting process, but that's because my plant was already dried out. I didn't notice right away that the plant lost the roots. So my advice to you would be, if you do really want to propagate this plant, make sure to take cuttings with at least 3 or 4 peduncles to sort of help it out. I do see sometimes only 2 peduncles sold as a cutting or something like that. I honestly would not take a chance on that cutting. I would look for at least 3. And you can kind of see here, that would be like a nice cutting. Sometimes I do think about cutting this plant and just making a fuller pot, but honestly, I think I would just much rather get another plant. It is not a plant that will branch out willingly. It is possible, but I don't think it's just something that happens a lot. Now let's talk about that root rot. Initially, this plant was in pawn because it arrived to me in pawn, and I just really was very careful with it. In a sense, I didn't want to change the mix because sometimes when you change the mix in which the plant grew, it can lose all the roots, yada, yada, yada. You know, going from semi-hydro to organic is a problem. Going from pawn to whatever can be also a problem. So I was like, let's stick with pawn. But this plant simply does not like too much moisture. Again, it does not make an extensive root system. In the nature, it grows in a hole in a tree. And even here, it's not really that big of a root system. You can see it's just in this tiny cup, and she doesn't look like she will need to be upsized anytime soon. So I grew it in pawn, and things were okay, but eventually it started to rot. I just think it's too wet. And you know, you can try to keep pawn a little bit drier, but for me, there's always that thin line where I dry them out too much and then the roots start to die back because it's too dry. So I personally would not recommend you growing this in pawn. You can do whatever you want. Maybe there are people who have amazing, huge Hoya spartioides in pawn. Congratulations. I'm quite happy in organic mix. This is just a bit of moss, very, very little moss for moisture, for prolonged moisture, but mostly it is bark and pumice. And she seems quite happy in it. She actually started to grow, I would say, even faster in this mix. And when it comes to watering, I really either water it very little when I water my plants, or I skip the watering. So I would water her every 2 weeks. That's pretending that I water every week, right? I don't. But I do like to keep her on the dry side. So if I do see any moisture here, I usually skip the watering. I will probably water her now. I think it's pretty dry. You can see there. It looks pretty dry to me, even the moss. There is just a bit of moisture here. But I think, oh, that's focusing on the peduncles, but I think we can just water her now. And I sort of keep her in this cup in a cup, so a little bit of water can stay there to help me out, but not too much that it would damage the roots. And also so that it doesn't drip all over my tent. We don't want that because the water will sort of fly through this mix. When it comes to fertilizing, I do fertilize it every time I water, and so far no issues. I have seen some plants that are very red. Honestly, no matter how much light I introduced, my peduncles never turned red. So there could be even more than 2 clones. I don't know if it's worth getting the other ones just because the peduncles are red. Potentially, but we also have to consider that those very red, very sun-stressed peduncles, those plants might be more difficult to keep alive, especially if you're gonna ship that from Southeast Asia to somewhere in Europe or the US. I do think you're risking a lot there. I think those could fall apart. I always think that it's, in most cases, better to get a plant that is green versus the one that is sun stressed, because that can just be a problem. So try to avoid that if you can. Borneo is pretty warm and this plant likes to be warm. The temperatures are from 23 degrees of Celsius, which is 73 of Fahrenheit, to 33 of Celsius, which is 91. So this is not your cool grower. You really should keep this plant warm. I always keep her in my grow tent. It does go below 23, but maybe to 21, 20 at worst. But it is really something that I would try to keep warm. And again, if you do want to see her bloom, you do have about 6-7 hours at night. But I would just say don't let that deter you. I really do think this is worth having. I don't think that you need a grow tent for it. I don't think high humidity is absolutely necessary. Again, I do know that some people say this is a difficult plant. For me, it's been chill, except for the root rot. She's been pretty chill. I don't know. I think she's just a very unique plant. It's one of the Hoyas that I think I will always have in my collection, even if something happens to this one, which let's not invite. I will just always want to have one. Mostly you will find this being sold as this sort of a bush, and it's not too expensive these days. It's not too hard to get. It really depends where you go and look for it. But I would really go, again, for a rooted plant versus the cuttings. So that's sort of my recommendation to you. And, you know, watch out for that watering. You can easily keep this in a small cup, mounted on a wall, in the tent, in the cabinet, and that's it. She's not very stable when you keep her like this. She kind of tends to drag the pot. Is someone knocking on my door? On my window? What is happening? There's no one. Okay, we're haunted again. Anyway, this is Hoya spartioides. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have this plant, what your experiences are, if you like it. If you don't like it, I don't want to hear it. This is not a democracy. I will see you very soon in the next video. And until then, enjoy the Hoyas. I swear I am hearing someone knocking the window. What is happening? We're definitely haunted. I would like to take some time to thank all of my patrons for their incredible support. A massive shout out to my $5 patrons. My 3 anonymous patrons, Alex von Siebenthal, Amber Clear, Anne Margaret Moon, Angela Bernard, Angela Parrish, and C. Aspen Drake, Betsy, Bougie Panda, Brett Noble, Candy Tap, Catherine Molina, Christy Claire Cola, Daniela, Danube Daniels, Daria Kaminska, Dili Heredia, Deanne Sikorsky, Dipanjali Rao, Ethan W, Erin Keenan, Eleni Saxon, Ellen, M. Mortal, Farah, Gathering Moz, Gina Geisigo, Green Tropical, Heather Uppingham, Hoji Scott, Hoya Heather, Yana Griffin, Jessica Chia, Yavin Denot, Kara, Catherine P, Casey Gross, Kelly Cook, Kelly Gallagher, Kelso, Kimberly Polka, Kiwi Mochi, Christy Ehrlich, LePlan the Staff, Lisa Mary MPLS, Lori J. Revert, Mandy Milliken, Marcel Har, Maria Stein, Maria Yarmolich, Maria West, Maris B, Marty Miller, Mary Rose, Melissa Walker, Michael Curley, Michelle Heron, Nicole Ferranti, Mirka Grun Roos, Moa Edmond, Nelian, Niha Basu, Nicole Maroney, Nan Quinn, Nita Macy, PJ Plant Druid, Rachel Peterson, Robin L. Jennings, Sandra Cornelius, Sherry Kumar, Stephanie H2O, Tessa Martins, Tia B, TJWO, Trista Bailey, Tristan Thomas, Wendy Rossman, Xenia Greenwood, The Walmuth, Zaira Rivera, and Zlatko Bliponi. A big thank you to my $3 patrons: Angelina Farnan, Kilon Constance, Daryl De Rosario, Deborah Violet, Eden C, Catherine Parsons, Kens Brown, Hal Lindbergh, Lindsay Ann, Mary H, Nella, Syke Sarah, Renee Church, Ringlob, Sophia Ryan, Tang Watanas Riakul, and Wendy Foreman. And a thank you to my $1 patrons: one anonymous patron, Alice Borland, Brandon Pacheco, Christina Greengrass, Colleen Coyle, Levi Couture Helvetica, Amelia Bronson, Jolie Sullivan, Jonas Berghort Larson, Kayla Vavra, Kelly Ash, Chris Perez, Lauren M, Lauren Enzo Romanian, Luzmin Fernandez, Neely Spicer, Nerdy Kathy, Olivia Chin Muller, and Tracy the Eyeballer.